In this video, I'm going to demonstrate an application to analyze data from Twitter using real-time analytics. The solution incorporates big data technology running in the cloud and some of the latest data visualization technology in Excel. The original code for this application is available on codeplex.com. If you search for Big Data Twitter Demo, what I'm going to show has been modified a little bit from this, but the main concepts are still the same. So here's a diagram of the overall application architecture. Data gets pulled in from Twitter in real time based on certain keywords that you specify in a configuration file. And if the tweet text matches those keywords, it'll get pulled in and then processed and sent out to 3 different outputs. The first output is summary information as well as a feed of the original tweet text that gets sent to a real-time dashboard. The detailed data, including the original tweet text and all the attributes that were pulled along with it, gets sent to Windows Azure Storage so that it can later be processed by HD Insights on Azure. Finally, the sentiment information is stored in a SQL database on Azure as well. So the service here calls out to a sentiment analysis service, and that sentiment data gets stored into a SQL Azure database. Okay, now let's take a look at the application in action. So let's take a look first at the real-time dashboard here, and we'll be able to see the Twitter traffic as it comes across in real time. So I'll go to the Stream Insight real-time dashboard, and we can see here it's actually using the WebSocket protocol to communicate from the browser to the web server. There's 3 separate feeds that come in from the server. The first feed that we'll talk about here is the aggregation by keyword. And so these boxes across the bottom here, we see the different keywords: Windows Phone, Excel, Bing, Windows 8, and Microsoft. We're actually getting aggregated data from the server that shows the sentiment analysis. So Windows Phone, we've got a 2.0 out of 4.0 sentiment analysis. The sentiment, a 4.0 is a positive sentiment, a 2.0 is a neutral, and then 0 is a negative. And then we also see the number of tweets over the last 5 seconds. And so we're aggregating this over a 5-second window for all of this data. So we get this first feed down here that shows us by keyword the aggregations. The second feed is this data up here, which is in the graph that shows the total number of tweets over that 5-second window across all of the keywords, as well as the average sentiment across all of those keywords. And so we can kind of see how that goes over time. And then over here in the right-hand side, we actually get the detailed text from these tweets along with a graphic that indicates whether it was a positive sentiment, negative sentiment, or neutral. So we get these 3 different feeds. We're seeing aggregated and detailed data as it occurs and as it comes into the system. So that's the first one of the outputs that comes out of this system. Let's take a look at another one of the outputs, which is the Azure SQL database. So I'll pull up Management Studio here and log into our Azure SQL database. Under databases, we've got a database called Twitter Data, and we've got a table out there called Tweet Info. And so I will go ahead and start a new query. Well, let's take a look at the columns in that table as well. So we can see we're just storing some very simple summary level data. We're storing a tweet ID, what time was it created, the sentiment on that tweet, and the topic of the tweet. And I should mention also that this application calls out to a third-party service for sentiment analysis. And so once we get the tweet data, we send that text over to the third-party service. It gives us back a sentiment value, and the service that we're calling in this case is a free service. I'm sure there are many options for different paid type services that may provide better quality than what we're seeing here, but you know, it does a pretty decent job, although you can definitely find cases where the sentiment doesn't match what it should. So let's go in here and take a look real quick at some of the data, and this would be data from today. So here's some of the data that we've captured. And we can see the topics and the sentiment, and then we can use this ID to actually go back and match it up with the original tweet text. Okay, so that's the second one of the outputs that comes from the system. And now let's go take a look at the third, which is in Windows Azure Storage. So we've got an application here called Cloud Explorer, which will allow us to connect to Windows Azure Storage and view it in a File Explorer type of view. So I just need to go here and connect up to the location where we're storing this data, and we can go out here and take a look and see some of the detailed data. And this is the actual JSON format that we get from Twitter, and we're storing multiple of these tweets in these files out here on Windows Azure Storage. So the interesting thing about this is that we can then go later and use a tool such as HD Insights for Azure and go through and analyze this data. And so we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. Okay, so now we're logged into Windows Azure, and we're looking at a 4-node cluster. This is the management portal for HD Insight for a 4-node cluster that we have out there that's pointing to the Windows Azure Storage where we stored all the raw tweet information. So this cluster is then able to go out and process that raw data, and we don't have to go through any type of elaborate ETL process to get the data loaded and available. We can query it directly from the web using tools like Hive. So the nice thing about this is that we can kind of spin up this cluster in the cloud whenever needed, and just as long as we point it at the Azure storage volume, it can go out and be able to access that data, and then we can shut this cluster down so that we don't have to pay for it when we don't need it. So I'm going to go into the interactive console here, click on Hive, and I can actually query the data directly here in this console. There's also a number of other things that I could potentially be doing here. I could write a MapReduce program. I could use JavaScript to go in and query it. I can actually remote desktop directly into the head node, the name node of my cluster, and use the kind of standard Hadoop tool set from within there. Okay, so it looks like our queries come back here, and you can see here that we're just kind of looking at the number of rows, the number of tweets that we have for each one of these different dates where the application was running and collecting data. And so, certainly interacting with it this way is one way, but what might be more interesting is to use a tool like Power Pivot in Excel, along with the Hive ODBC driver, to be able to pull data into Excel for more detailed analysis. And so I've done that as well here, and I'm going to go into Power Pivot and just kind of go over the model here real quickly. So I've got a model that I pulled in from a couple of different sources. It's really the data that we just saw in HD Insight, as well as the data on SQL on Azure. This table here is the table that comes from SQL Azure, and then the tweet details table comes from HD Insight, and then we've also done some pre-processing of some of this data to kind of break it out into separate tables here that we did on HD Insight before pulling it in here into Power Pivot, into the model. And so that enables us to go in and use tools like PowerView, where we've got a little PowerView report here that kind of shows, this view up here shows the number of followers by screen name, and so these are really kind of the influential tweeters, people that have a lot of followers and that have posted tweets based on some of our topics. And then here's the count of tweets by topic over here. Down here we have the count of tweets by sentiment, and then here we have the count of tweets by hashtag, so if people have included a hashtag in there. And of course this is fully interactive, so if we want to go and look for this first person here, we can see that they posted tweets on a couple of our different topics here, Microsoft, Windows 8, and Bing, and it looks like they were mostly neutral as far as the sentiment. And then let's look at TechCrunch. TechCrunch, we've got SharePoint and Skype, and again, both neutral. So let's go in and look at the other PowerView report we have here. And on this one, we have the sentiment over here on the left-hand side and the count of tweets across the bottom. And then the size of the bubble is based on the number of followers, the aggregate number of followers by all the people that posted tweets. And so we can see here, Skype, it looks like the sentiment is a little bit more positive, up towards almost the 2.5 range. Xbox, it looks like it's about neutral. And then over here we have Bing, which is more on the positive side, but the total number of followers is not nearly as high as the bubble is, a little bit smaller. And so of course we can use the play axis to play this over time and kind of see what the state of it was over time. And if we click on one of these bubbles, we can see what the pattern was of that particular bubble over time. And then the last thing that I want to show here is a new tool called GeoFlow, which we can go into GeoFlow, and it enables us to kind of map this data out. So I'll just create a new tour here. And as I go in here, I can select the latitude and longitude. As people post these tweets, of course, in the tool, depending on what client they're using for Twitter, it typically will ask them if it's okay for their location data to be included. And if the location data is included, we get a latitude and longitude from where they were when they posted that tweet. So if we just select the Map It option here, we can map out these tweets and see, where they came from. And we can just kind of spin the globe around and see where the tweets that we captured were coming from. And then the other thing that we can do here is we can include, let's say, the number of followers if we want to see how influential some of these tweets were. We can kind of see where some of the influential ones were located at based on the height of the bar. There's all kinds of different possibilities that we have here in terms of being able to graphically display this data. But the point is that based on the Hive ODBC driver and having that data in SQL Azure, it enables us to go in and use tools like Power Pivot, PowerView, and GeoFlow. So again, to summarize, we've looked at this application end-to-end that pulls in data from Twitter, calls out to a service to do sentiment analysis on each tweet, and then surfaces that data in a real-time dashboard, as well as storing it off for later analysis. And then we looked at how we can use HD Insight on Azure to process the data and later pull it into Excel, which makes it available to all these rich tools that we just looked at. And Again, a version of this demo is available on CodePlex, and you're free to download it and set it up in your own environment.